After years of quietly providing for my family financially, I was banned from going home to my mother's birthday because I didn't look good standing next to my sister's boyfriend. But everyone was shocked when my sister's boyfriend called me boss. And then, the phone rang only twice before my father's voice, a little too brisk, cut through the quiet hum of my morning. I had called to say I was coming home early for Mom's birthday, expecting the usual pleasantries, perhaps even a request to pick up her favorite cake. Instead, after a vague pause, his words landed like stones. "Ryan," he said, his tone heavy. "If possible, maybe don't come home this year." I gripped my steaming coffee mug tighter, a slow heat rising from the back of my neck. My heart quickened, but I kept my voice steady, almost nonchalant. "It's fine, Dad. I've got everything sorted. No trouble." The pause stretched, a palpable silence. Then, his voice returned, firmer, colder. "Jessica's bringing her boyfriend home this year. He's a manager, someone important. Speaks well, and carries himself properly. And your job? Well, it isn't very comfortable to talk about, so it's best if you don't come." A tremor ran through me, a sharp jolt of disbelief. My fingers tightened around the mug, the ceramic warm against my palm. "What the hell did you just say?" I heard my own voice, edged with a surprise I struggled to contain. "Are you seriously saying that to me right now?" He offered no apology, no softening. Only a stark, flat declaration. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you insist on coming, don't call me your father." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, my palm clammy with sweat. The silence in my apartment was absolute, broken only by the faint thrum of the refrigerator. I stood there, rooted, staring at nothing, his words echoing in the sudden emptiness. "You coming home would just embarrass the whole family. If you still insist on coming back, don't call me your father." Each syllable was cold, precise, leaving no room for misunderstanding, no sliver of hope that I had misheard. My jaw clenched, a tight knot forming in my throat. A wave of memories, sharp and unbidden, crashed over me. 2 years. For 2 years, I had quietly, consistently, paid their bills, electricity, water, internet. Not a word had ever been exchanged, no thanks, no acknowledgement. And now, I was the family's shame. My hands, still slightly trembling, reached for my phone. My mind, however, had begun to clear, to cool. I opened my banking app, navigated to my transaction history. I wasn't looking for proof of their ingratitude, not exactly. I just needed a number, a solid figure to anchor the shifting landscape of my emotions. Month after month, without fail, the automatic deductions, power, water, internet. Nearly $400 every single month. I scrolled to the very bottom. Total amount spent, $9,842.17. I stared at the sum, not in astonishment, but with a peculiar sense of emptiness settling in my chest. Not grief, not even fury, but a hollow space where something familiar had once resided. Nearly $10,000. And I was the shame. As I gazed at the long list of transactions, a quiet question arose, one no one in my family had ever posed in my 30 years. Has Jessica ever done as much? It wasn't jealousy that prompted the thought, nor a desire for credit. It was simply that if I was deemed the family's shame, against what standard was I being measured? I had given, silently, nearly $10,000 in support, never once asking for anything in return. What had she given? Had she known sacrifice, or the humbling need to ask for help? Or did she simply arrive, beautiful and poised, with a successful boyfriend, making an impression without effort? I wasn't keeping score, not in the way they might think. I was asking because, for the first time, I recognized that fairness had never been a consideration in our household. I had grown accustomed to the periphery since childhood. In family photos, I was often partially hidden, or just at the edge of the frame, my gaze not quite meeting the camera. No one ever told me to step aside, but I always did. Jessica was the focal point of every family event, from birthdays and graduations to her heartbreaks. There was always a reason for everyone to rally around her, console her, celebrate her. I couldn't recall the last time someone had simply asked if I was okay. Jessica was 2 years older, but our difference was never about age. She was the hope, the future, the child our parents proudly showcased to relatives. And me? If I was mentioned at all, it was a brief footnote. "Ryan, oh, he's fine. I believe he works in technology." I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed out of trouble, and quietly handled things, they would eventually see me. But they never did. It turns out, when you're used to being invisible, nobody notices when you leave. It started nearly 2 years ago, my mother's call. She spoke of rising living costs, unexpectedly high bills, and a retirement income that just wasn't enough. Then, gently, hesitantly, she asked, "If you could help us, even a little, it would mean a lot." I agreed, assuming it would be temporary, just a few months. But the months blurred into one another. No one mentioned stopping, no backup plan emerged. Every now and then, I'd inquire, "Is Jessica helping at all, Mom?" She'd always deflect, sometimes with just this month. "Your sister will pitch in next time." Other times, "Your sister's covering Dad's medical stuff." That's not easy either. I knew these lines by heart, their hollow ring familiar. I just smiled and let it go, because I knew none of it was true. So I kept sending the money, nearly $400 a month, reliably and quietly, without complaint. Unacknowledged. It wasn't that I didn't care. I felt it was the right thing to do. I had hoped that my quiet responsibility would make them see me. But today, after all of it, they looked at me and called me the family shame. A quiet certainty settled over me, a profound clarity that extinguished the last embers of anger and heartbreak. That's enough. I opened my banking app again. With deliberate taps, I navigated to the automatic payments section, where I had set up the monthly transfers for power, water, and internet. One by one, I canceled them. There was no hesitation, no malice in the act. It was a soft, clean break, not to exact revenge, but to preserve the one thing they hadn't yet taken from me, a semblance of self-respect. A week later, my mother's text arrived, her tone as soothing as always. No mention of the uninvitation, no apology. "I just got a notice that the internet bill is due. Can you take care of it?" I read it, stared at the screen, then placed the phone down without a reply. It wasn't an attempt to make a statement. It was simply the profound realization that after everything, their first thought was a request. "No, are you okay? No, can we talk? Just pay the bill." My silence, I felt, said everything that needed to be said. 2 weeks later, my father called. I let it ring. He left a voicemail, his voice sharp, impatient. "The power company called. This month's bill hasn't been paid. What's going on?" No worry, no remembrance of his words. I listened, then turned off the screen, placing the phone face down. And so, I waited, in silence, until my mother's birthday. It was 3 weeks after my father told me not to come home. The party, I knew, would be going on as planned. Her favorite roasted chicken, cake from her favorite bakery, relatives gathered around the dinner table. Everything is meticulously arranged, except for me. That afternoon, at precisely 4:00 p.m., my phone chimed. My mother called. I gazed at her name on the screen for a few seconds before setting the phone down. I didn't answer, didn't even consider it. My father called a few minutes later, then Jessica. 3 calls in less than 10 minutes. I let them all go to voicemail. No curiosity, no urge to reply. I stayed where I was, leaning lightly against the back of the chair, my gaze fixed on the fogged-up glass of my living room window. The sky outside was a dull gray. No rain, but cold in that silent, creeping way that hints at winter at the threshold. The messages began to arrive about 10 minutes later. Mom was first. "Ryan, the power has been turned off. The entire house is dark. Please pay the bill." I picked up the phone and read it in silence. No anger, no surprise. Just a calm hollowness spreading through my chest, the kind that comes after years of carrying a weight, alone. Then my father, "No water. We can't cook. Handle it now." Followed by Jessica, "Internet's down. Guests are arriving. Please fix this urgently." I looked at the clock, 5:12 p.m. exactly 3 weeks ago, immediately after my father's words. I had canceled those automatic payments. And now, in the midst of the birthday party they had uninvited me from, everything began to shut down. Power, water, internet. Each service vanishing just when they needed it most. I didn't text back. I didn't call. I felt no need to explain. I simply sat there, carefully rotating the cold coffee cup in my hands, my eyes still fixed on the window, as if seeing beyond what was visible. And at that moment, I understood. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because there was no one left to carry their burden. Around 6:00 p.m., my phone began buzzing again, a relentless vibration. But this time, it wasn't my parents or Jessica. It was the relatives, the ones who only appeared for holidays but felt entitled to judgment. The messages came in waves. Disrespectful, one declared. Another, more pointed, you embarrassed your mother in front of the whole family. And then, a quiet jab. Your sister was right. People like you shouldn't show up on a happy day. I perused every communication, neglecting to respond. Not because stillness suggested assent, but because I was weary of clarifying my position to individuals who invariably aligned themselves with the most assertive opinion rather than what was just. I was about to set aside the device when the display illuminated once more. Aunt Lauren. She was the sole family member who still had faith in me, initiating a call on an antiquated video application exclusively employed by us, for we were the only ones who valued direct visual contact sufficiently during crucial moments. I hesitated, then responded on the second chime. Her countenance materialized, gently illuminated by the amber radiance of the cooking area behind her. A kitchen I was profoundly familiar with, each fissure in the partition, every groaning cupboard. But this evening, the chamber seemed altered. I heard the jingle of cutlery, disquieted mirth, muted discussions. Her eyes, kind and distressed, connected with mine via the display. You're not going to cover the expense, Ryan, she stated, her voice gentle, soliciting comprehension. I returned her stare. When I eventually uttered words, my voice was deliberate, as though unearthing something deeply concealed. You know, Auntie, Dad told me not to come. I gulped audibly. He said if I still persisted in appearing, I ought not to refer to him as my progenitor any longer. Aunt Lauren became quiet. Her gaze wandered, surveying the chamber beyond her. Then, pandemonium commenced. My mother's voice, piercing and high-pitched, penetrated the clamor. Tell him I'm disgraced by him. On such a momentous occasion, of all times, how could he commit such an act? My father's voice, more resonant, irritated. It's not so grave. It's merely settling some accounts. What sort of individual becomes trivial regarding funds? Another voice, I thought it was my uncle, grumbled quietly. Unfortunate Jessica, compelled to contend with a sibling of that nature. Footsteps approached the camera. Jessica's face appeared behind Aunt Lauren, her arms crossed, her lips twisted in annoyance. He even picked up the call. Mom's been crying all day. Does he even care? Seriously, no shame at all. I said nothing. I simply watched, observing, as if quiet was the only true defense I had. Just as I considered ending the call, another face entered the left side of the screen. A young man, perfectly combed hair, a dark suit. His eyes, initially confused, widened slightly. Then, a hesitant smile. Hey, boss, he said, his voice a little scratchy, as if the words felt out of place in this setting. I froze, my gaze fixed on the screen, my hand unconsciously tightening on the phone. I hadn't expected this. Not here. Not tonight, when I was deemed too shameful to attend. I stared at him for a few seconds more, and then it all clicked, his expression, his tone. Of course, he was one of the new personnel, recently transferred from our southern branch. We had exchanged a few emails. He'd sent me a couple of reports. But I had no idea he was Jessica's boyfriend, the one they were all so desperate to impress. The room behind Aunt Lauren seemed to hold its breath. I saw her glance over her shoulder, and the kitchen erupted in a frantic murmur. Then, a quiet voice. Wait, what did he just call Ryan? Another, confused. Boss? Does that mean Ryan is Jessica's boyfriend's boss? The whispers grew, a rising wave of uneasy disbelief. And me? I just kept looking at the screen. No nod, no denial. I was simply waiting to see where this would go. The young man straightened, looked past the camera to the others in the room, and spoke plainly. In case you didn't know, I work at Pacific Terry Tech. Mr. Ryan is one of the company's co-founders. His words were crisp, clear, loud enough to cut through the clatter and murmuring. The room fell into an unnatural silence. He added, It's not awkward, simply stunned. I still didn't say anything. I pressed my lips together and gave a soft, almost imperceptible nod of confirmation. He looked back at the screen, his eyes wide. My voice, calm and even, as if the words had been waiting for him, filled the sudden quiet. Hope your big introduction goes perfectly. Then, I disconnected. That night, I slept soundly. No tossing and turning, No jolting awake in the dark with old questions replaying. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not from triumph, but from a quiet, internal recognition. The next day, before the sunlight had fully filtered through my thin curtains, I reached for my phone and checked my emails. A few meeting reminders, some accounting comments, and then a name I didn't recognize in the from field, Hudson King. I opened it. The first line struck me immediately. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were Jessica's brother. I've always respected you at the company." I arched an eyebrow, leaning into my pillow, and continued reading. Hudson wrote that he had been truly astonished to discover the family connection. And then, without sidestepping or softening it, he stated, "I didn't expect her to be like that. I'll be ending this relationship. Thank you for not putting me on the spot before everyone." I laid the phone on my chest and closed my eyes briefly. It took me a few minutes to reopen the inbox and begin typing my response, slowly, clearly, without embellishment. "Hudson, that's your matter. I don't expect anyone to make decisions to stay in my good graces. Think carefully before you do anything. And for the record, I don't bring family into the workplace." I pressed send. No further thought, no lingering emotion. For me, that was sufficient. Some things, once clarified, I didn't require anything else. Around 10:00 a.m., while I was winding up a meeting with department heads, my phone rang in my pocket. I pulled it out. "Jessica." I stared at the name for a few seconds before hitting decline. Not out of rage, not to make a point, but simply because I'd had enough of apologies that only appeared after everything had already come apart. Within 5 minutes, a message arrived. "I'm sorry. I didn't think Hudson would change like that. You're his boss. If you said something, I'm sure he'd listen. Please talk to him. Ask him to come back to me." After reading it, I walked to the hallway window and leaned against it. I reread the message several times before typing my response, neither too long nor too short for her to understand. Hudson didn't leave because I told him to. He left because of how you live, how you treat people, how you look down on what you don't understand, and how you always assume that with a soft enough voice you can steer anyone. I pressed send, put the phone back in my pocket, and returned to my desk. Less than a minute later, another message arrived. "I know I messed up. This time I mean it. I'll change. Please believe me. Just this once." I did not respond. I read it, sat with it for a bit, and nothing shifted inside me. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood. Sometimes the distance between two people isn't in the apology. It's when the apology arrives. I gently deleted the message, leaving nothing behind, and returned to my current life. A week later, on a Friday afternoon, as I returned to my dwelling from the vehicle shelter, I halted abruptly on the veranda. My parents were positioned at the main entrance, each clasping a modest travel bag, their visages etched with weariness from an extensive journey. I did not inquire about their presence, or if they'd undertaken such a lengthy journey solely to meet me. This was no informal call. I unlatched the entrance and bid them welcome inside. Absence of strain, no feigned courtesy, just a straightforward decision. I wished to avoid that discussion out on the stoop, where the breeze was intensifying. We took seats in the sitting area, the hot beverage on the table still emitting vapor. My father initiated the dialogue. He expressed regret, his tone softer than customary. My mother corroborated, stating they'd considered matters thoroughly. Perhaps they'd exceeded acceptable boundaries, and the situation ought not to have escalated to this stage. I remained silent, without interjecting, merely hearing, endeavoring to ascertain if this apology signified the conclusion of one phase or the commencement of another. And as I had anticipated, my father's demeanor altered. "We're kin, Ryan, and relatives assist each other. We brought you up, provided for your education. All your current possessions, some portion originates from our contributions, correct?" I regarded him. My facial expression stayed constant, but my posture subtly stiffened. Then my mother spoke, her tone hushed, as if she were proposing something perfectly sensible. "If you could perhaps transfer to us approximately $2,000 every month, merely a modest contribution. It's a negligible sum for an individual of your standing." I gazed intently at the pair of individuals occupying my lounge. The identical people who had once disinvited me from a familial gathering because they deemed me a disgrace. And now they were within my residence, assigning a financial worth to their contrition. $2,000 each month, because I was their offspring. And to them, My achievements represented an obligation I was bound to repay. Subsequent to their proposition, a subdued snicker emanated from me. Neither boisterous nor sarcastic, but the type that emerges when an individual recounts a narrative that utterly lacks coherence. I regarded my parents. Their gaze was locked on mine, as if they anticipated my prompt assent. But I was not enraged. I'd progressed too much to be disturbed by such matters any longer. I reclined in my seat, my utterance composed and distinct. What about Jessica? How much will she be donating monthly? The room appeared to become still. The atmosphere grew dense. My father shot a swift look at my mother. She replied deliberately, her tone lowering a little. Your sibling's employment remains precarious, and the dismantling of her relationship with Hudson has exacted a cost on her. I gently inclined my head, unfazed. The identical time-worn justifications cloaked in compassionate phrasing, but they were simply evasions. I lifted my eyes, gazing directly at them. If she consents to assist you with $2,000 per month, I'll follow suit. Neither exceeding, nor diminishing. They uttered no words, just stared at me, endeavoring to ascertain my earnestness. I persisted calmly. Or if you want me to bear the entire sum, I'll need a documented stipulation, a binding contract attesting that following your demise, the property shall be entirely mine. I remained motionless after that. Absence of coercion, no additional elucidation, merely anticipating their response now that, for the first time, I was delineating the stipulations for something they'd always felt was exclusively my burden. The moment I concluded my remarks, the quietude in the chamber grew profound, thick. My father abruptly stood up. He forcibly brought his hand down on the timber surface, overturning the mug and dislodging its liquid. His yell reverberated, his torso heaving with rage. You're imposing stipulations for your parents. We nurtured you for more than 2 decades, and now you want to haggle over petty sums with us like this? What manner of existence are you pursuing, huh? He was vociferating with such volume, I wouldn't have been surprised if the adjacent residents overheard the entire exchange. I neither stirred nor recoiled. I simply remained seated, palms reposing on the seat's supports, my stare locked upon him, devoid of frigidity, yet absent of tenderness. I allowed him to conclude before deliberately rising to my feet. My utterance emerged subdued and composed, yet distinct enough to pierce the disorder he had recently engendered. I think you both ought to depart from my residence. It was not a menace. It was not uttered in wrath. It was merely an appeal from someone who had attained the boundary of what deference could offer. None uttered any further words. Only the sound of their baggage being pulled over the timber surface, and the entrance latching closed in their wake, more hushed than the profound impact they had just instilled within me. A biennium has elapsed since I last beheld them, precisely at my own abode. I did not obstruct their telephonic contacts, alter my electronic mail address, or sever all ties completely. I simply ceased initiating contact, and I tarried. I waited to see if they would still regard me as kin now that I was no longer overshadowed by responsibility and compulsion. In these 24 months, there has been no telephone communication or electronic dispatch inquiring about my well-being, no acknowledgement of anniversaries, physical state, or even a fundamental query about my current state. I once held the conviction that one day they would change. But I've perceived that not all individuals undergo such a transformation, especially those who have never acknowledged their initial erroneousness. I still reside in this location, am employed, and continue my routine life. The only difference is that I no longer permit myself to be a mere conduit for emotional withdrawal, willing to contribute and suffer detriment under the guise of duty. And if there's one solitary insight I have acquired from all of this, it's that kinship does not represent an arena where individuals can exact benevolence and label it affection. A genuine family is an association where your inherent worth is recognized as a person, irrespective of your contributions. Not as a financial resource, not as a contingency strategy, not as a final option when all else proves unsuccessful. I once believed my family was capable of rectifying any issue. But after being regarded as an outsider within my own dwelling on countless occasions, I opted to assert myself and interrupt the pattern. Perhaps I was finally acquiring self-worth at the opportune moment. Please share your perspectives underneath. I genuinely desire to receive your feedback whether you concur or dissent. If the narrative struck a chord with you, please become a subscriber to aid the channel's sustenance. There are still numerous accounts awaiting narration and reception. Be well and anticipate our next encounter. Thank you for remaining until the conclusion. Thank you for viewing. If you have not yet joined as a subscriber, please do so and activate the alert icon to stay informed with more astounding true-to-life narratives unfolding nearby. Lesson: there comes a point in life when silence isn't kindness, it's being erased. I spent years believing that quiet sacrifice would earn me a place at the table, that my worth would be measured by loyalty, consistency, and care. But what I learned, the hard way, is that some families don't see love unless it's loud, expensive, or convenient for them. I gave without asking, supported without recognition, and stayed present without being seen. And yet, the moment I no longer fit their image of pride, I was discarded. Respect isn't something owed just because of titles like parent or sibling. It has to be earned and reciprocated. What do you think? Do you believe Ryan made the right decision by stepping away from his family, even after all he had sacrificed for them? Have you ever been in a situation where your silence or loyalty was taken for granted? I genuinely want to hear your experiences, whether they resonate with this story or challenge it.